What's up, everybody? This is Kurt from Polymath Sports, and today we're going to be talking about how COVID will impact the NFL. Now, there will be another video on our channel that specifically discusses the betting impact of COVID on the NFL. But for this, let's just talk about how it's going to impact the game, and you can draw your own conclusions about how it could impact betting based on some of these factors. So first, we'll discuss home field advantage. Then we'll talk about opt-outs. Then we'll talk about backup quarterbacks and backup players. And then finally, we'll talk about clusters or possible outbreaks of COVID by position and how that'll impact the game. So first, home field advantage. Home field advantage is a major component in teams winning or losing. And obviously, you're playing at your home field. You have more fans rooting for you. You have lots of noise in your favor, and just momentum and camaraderie of your fans around the team all contribute to giving teams an advantage when they play at home. And it's interesting because this year, at least for the first few weeks of the season, definitely, teams have committed to having no fans in the stadium. So how is this going to impact home field advantage? First, who stands to gain from this? Well, who gains from it are teams that, when they play at home, typically do not have an advantage or would otherwise be, have an improved outlook with fewer, with less of the current dynamic that they have. And who comes to mind for this is the LA Chargers. So for those who don't know, when the Chargers moved from San Diego, they were put in this soccer stadium with, I think, 20 to 30,000 people in it. So the capacity of the stadium is small, and as a result, a lot of fans actually, in most games, their home fans are outnumbered by away fans that may be visiting LA. And so you get this kind of majority away team fan effect in the current Chargers stadium. So it's been a home field disadvantage for the LA Chargers up until this season. But I think for those reasons, the LA Chargers will stand to gain from this COVID effect on home field. Now, conversely, who's going to lose or be at a disadvantage from this? Well, these are teams who have historically had a significant home field advantage. And I've listed the 5 top teams ranked by home field percentage of wins over the last 10 years. And you can see the New England Patriots win about 85% of their home games, followed by the Baltimore Ravens, who win about 75%. The Green Bay Packers also win about 75%, and Lambeau is just famously a home field advantage stadium. And same thing, Pittsburgh Steelers, 71%, and the New Orleans Saints also about 70%. So these would be, I'd say, the top 5 teams that would stand to lose from the effect of COVID. And you can extend this really out to any team that is going to have a home field advantage, which is most teams. Secondly, let's talk about opt-outs. So the NFL offered $150,000 to players and would freeze their contract if they decided to opt out before August 13th of this year. So as the time of recording this was just a week ago. And it turned out most of these opt-outs were more of these fringe kind of players where, maybe their financial incentive was such that they could just kind of take this $150K and run with it. But the team that really was impacted by this significantly was the Patriots. They have 8 guys on their team that opted out, and these are significant players too. These aren't sort of more of these fringe guys. And so I think the Patriots are going to be significantly impacted. We can expect that this season. And some speculate it's maybe because Belichick tends to ride his team hard, and Patriots might be thinking, if there's little chance of a Super Bowl win, why go through that kind of season anyways? So, but that's besides the point. But the point is really just that the Patriots are going to be impacted by this season. That's something to look out for. Third, another interesting effect we may look forward to in the season is these kind of teams that are out of contention that may see an increase in mid-season opt-outs. So these would be teams like the Raiders, the Jets, the Falcons, or the Giants, who are out of contention and around the mid-season after their players have gone through, say half their contract and earned their money. You may see, an increase in stories like, players having health concerns or family concerns about COVID and deciding to opt out. And I'm not saying those aren't valid concerns, but I'm just saying, given the financial incentives, you may see an increase in that around mid-season. Now, third, let's talk about backup quarterbacks. So really there are, backup quarterbacks will shift the lines. If a starting quarterback is out and a backup has to go in, that'll shift the lines more than any other position in football. So this presents a really unique scenario for the season, given that if a quarterback is, out or test positive, that a team is going to be significantly impacted, and the lines will reflect that as well. So right now the NFL says if you're testing positive, you must be out for 2 weeks or have 2 negative tests in a row. So the strength of backup players is going to be more of a factor this year than any other year. And that's something to consider as you're either making your fantasy draft picks or you're betting on a game or you're betting for a few games in the future. It's really important that you're mindful that things could change in a given week, based on COVID results, and that having a safe hedge against a quarterback being out is going to be significant this season. Finally, let's talk about clusters of infections. So we know that COVID can spread rapidly, and it tends to spread in dense crowds. So based on how players practice, like all wide receivers would practice together, for example, or maybe your defensive line would all practice together. So these kind of routines are going to increase the chance of a position level cluster outbreak. So if one thing to look for and pay attention to is if one player on a team tests positive, look for a heightened risk of other teams with a similar position to also test positive over the next week or two. So we know there's kind of a lag, but if they're in close proximity and practicing together, you're going to see a lot of these cluster infections. So it is something to look into. It's something to consider in your betting strategy and your fantasy strategies, to be mindful of this changing factor. It's not like an isolated event where one player is out. It's going to actually increase a group level risk for that player's position. So that's, I think, the final thing we were going to talk about in this video. We covered home field advantage, opt-outs, and backup quarterbacks, and then these cluster outbreaks. There's obviously a lot more. I'd be interested to hear in the comments what you all have to think. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit subscribe and stay tuned to what else we post, and check out our website where you can build your own statistical models and start predicting what are going to be the outcomes of your favorite game.